Hi, everyone. My name is Ed Zimmerman, the host of Ed Talks, the energy storage podcast where we unpack the industry and speak to different movers and shakers, different organizations in that space and the opportunities presented and some of the challenges as well. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by John Cerveny, Senior Director at New York Best. As I mentioned before, CNP has a manufacturing facility in Binghamton, New York, and we've had the opportunity over the years to work very closely with New York Best as an organization, as well as a number of other organizations in the state of New York. And John has very graciously agreed to join us today and speak about some of the amazing work that they're doing at New York Best in the state of New York, and the opportunities that exist in that market. So thank you very much, John. Really appreciate you having you here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting us.
You know, do you want to maybe, introduce yourself, speak a little bit about your time at New York Best and some of the great stuff you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Start maybe by just saying thanks for the invitation to come join you here and see the operation in Chateauguay. Did I say that right? All right. Good. So John Cerveny, been with New York Best from our inception pretty much in 2010, so almost 14 years. And New York Best is an industry association based in Albany, New York, but we cover a statewide footprint. We are, a member organization, have about 185 member companies primarily, but other research institutions who are all part of New York Best, government entities are part of New York Best as well. Yep. And we grew out of a project of New York State between the governor's office and our state energy office called NYSERDA. That was an investment of about $25 million back in 2010. That funding created New York Best and also set aside a dedicated pool of funds to support the growth of batteries and energy storage in the state. So it was a really kind of an early recognition by the state of New York that this is an important area and it deserves investment.
Absolutely.
It was interesting because it was a one-time kind of windfall, $25 million that came from sale of air pollution permits, of all things, from Midwest power plants. And they could have just assumed that money back into the general fund and paid off a debt somewhere or something. But instead, they actually chose to make the investment in this space, understanding the importance of batteries and energy storage to the future of the state, our energy and economic growth. And then, in the years that have gone by, I would say that for many years, it felt like my colleague Bill Acker, who was our executive director, and I felt like we were voices in the wilderness a little bit, working the story, identifying partners and organizations to partner with, building some resources. We helped put in place both a battery testing center in Rochester. It's a 15,000 square foot facility that has 650 channels for testing batteries and up to large scale systems. We have the battery prototyping center. We also helped get the funding together and instigate at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. That is another resource that is, part of an ecosystem that, so over those years, we were putting these pieces together. And then I'd say in 2019, kind of a watershed moment for the state of New York, Stanley Whittingham, who is a professor at Binghamton University, was awarded the Nobel Prize for the work that he did back in the 70s, really the foundational work that created lithium-ion batteries, some of the first work done in that space. So as a Nobel laureate, he's our intellectual leader, I would say, of a lot of activity. And it drew additional attention and partners and now resources in. And you notice my shirt today doesn't say New York Best, it says New Energy New York. I work for New York Best. New Energy New York is a program that is funded at Binghamton University, that is funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration, along with the state of New York, total of $113 million that is focused on growing opportunities for battery and energy storage manufacturing and technology development in the state. So there's a number of aspects to that program, 5 different elements. The one that New York Best has ownership and leadership for is the supply chain development activity. And that's the part that I lead with a team of 4 who we've interacted with your folks in Binghamton numerous times. And along with really dozens, it's in over 150 companies in the state where we've done site visits, we've understood what their capabilities are and trying to stitch together this tapestry of resources that add up to something greater than the sum of the parts, right?
Yeah.
So we continue to do that kind of work. We were out a week ago. I was in Buffalo and Rochester, and they had less snow at that time than you do here. So.
Well, not any longer.
Right, exactly. We brought the snow apparently.
There you go.
You're welcome. But those kind of visits are the things that really cement for us what the resources are, where they are, what they can do, the capacities, and how we can help fill maybe some of those gaps by attracting new companies in or new investment in to the state to really produce a very robust ecosystem that supports everything from early stage research through to full product commercialization and high volume production.
Absolutely.
And it's been a really interesting time because, in those 14 years at New York Best, the first 8 of those years, all of us did a little bit of everything because we run conferences, we run information sessions, we help startup companies find funding. All of those things are part of our DNA. We've always done some of this work that is related to supply chain and manufacturing development, but really for the last 2.5 years now, I've been able to focus nearly 100% on this and have additional people to do the same thing. So it's been kind of a transformative couple of years for me, and I think we're starting to see some really interesting results, right?
Yeah.
And, connections we've made have led to business opportunity and to growth and investment.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah.
If you look broadly at batteries and demand, I think if you wind the clock back 3 years ago, everyone was on this super high trajectory. EVs are going to hit a certain adoption rate faster than it actually has played out in reality. Yeah. However, when you back up and say it's still growing 20% a year, and globally, exactly. Yeah. So there's huge growth in that giant demand that comes from the transportation sector. The other kind of unsung hero that is doing extraordinarily well is energy storage. So stationary storage systems or mobile, right? Those trailer mounted systems.
Absolutely.
We're seeing, New York State alone, we have codified through our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that passed in 2019. The initial pass on that, we had a 3 gigawatt deployment goal for 2030 in New York State. That actually, just in the second iteration of that, the strategy document that drives that goal was doubled to 6 gigawatts.
6 gigawatts.
So as we stand here today, we have about 1.4 gigawatts deployed in the state. In order to hit the target of 6 by 2030, I mentioned this number earlier. We're somewhere like 3 megawatts per day between now and 2030 needs to be deployed. So we're on a track to get there, and the way we expect to have that happen, NYSERDA will be issuing some new incentive programs that will address the upfront cost and help reduce some of the upfront cost for deployment across 3 different sectors. The bulk storage sector, so things that are 5 megawatts and larger, up to 5 megawatts is called the retail sector, and then a program for residential as well. Yeah.
So people can actually deploy, energy storage solutions at home, in the garage, in the basement, to help offset some of their power costs.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And the interesting thing about the way the incentive is shaping up at the bulk level is the thing called the index storage credit, and that has a strike price that is bid by producers into the market. When they're accepted through sort of an auction process, they actually then there's a reference price that gets generated by NYSERDA. If the strike price is above the reference price, the difference is paid out to the operator of the system. If it's below, they pay back.
Right.
So it gives certainty in the way those systems perform on the grid. The more good they do in the places that need more good done,
of course,
the better they make out in economic.
That's really cool. So you've really, you're approaching this from a number of different angles, right? So not only is the state of New York committed to a certain quantity of deployed systems, right, sort of to an extent generating a market within the state, but you've invested, as you mentioned, through the supplier development programs, through the ecosystem program, the development of this comprehensive set of capabilities to support not only the requirements of the state of New York, but then other states in the union as well. right across the United States. And I know, just speaking from my own experience working with the team in New York Best and AMT, that's also a part of the development of this supplier network. It's a phenomenal tool. We've acquired opportunities through it. We've acquired new suppliers through it because that really is the focus, right? It is, what do you need as an enterprise in the state of New York to be successful in your domain?
Right.
And are there other domains that you could be approaching, that you could be successful in, that you may not be aware of?
Right.
And so the value of that for certainly organizations like CMP and some of our peers in the state of New York, it just can't be overstated. It's a phenomenal program. Yeah. It's great.
Happy to hear you say that. That's the intent, right?
Yep.
The fact that we have all of these kind of different components of an overall strategy means that we can really kind of meet people where they have needs. And if you're a startup and you have good ideas about something that is going to leapfrog a new technology, whether a new chemistry or a new way to control existing chemistry, a new way to produce batteries, we've got places to plug you in and help make that happen. On the other end, as you just mentioned, if you're looking to find additional domestic sources, U.S. domestic or North American domestic sources, we can help there. And part of that story is we created a database of suppliers that's accessible through our website, that is free to be listed and free to search. That we've had stories come out of it already that connections have been made, and I'll mention one thing, that we didn't start with like a big list of NAICS codes of 5,000 companies that we winnowed down. We started at 0 and we opened it up by invitation for people to join. We're at 180 some companies now that are in there who we know things about. We can give a curated kind of tour of, you go and use the database and find a list of 10 companies. You can call us up and we will talk to you about those companies, and we know something about them, and in many cases have been there and seen their part.
And I think that's one of the things that really sets some of the strategies that are being used in the state of New York apart, right? It is very much driven by face-to-face interaction. It is in-person visits to factories. Everyone that we've worked with on your side has been deeply interested in, what do we do as an organization? What are our challenges? Where can support be provided? Where can we support others? Because that's equally important when you're developing that type of ecosystem. And I love that you mentioned NAICS codes, right? Because that of all the metrics by which to evaluate an organization, that one is probably the least reliable.
It's a blunt instrument.
It's a blunt instrument, precisely that. But the fact that you're boots on the ground, you're visiting factories, and you're helping make those connections, help develop these organizations is really just an excellent example. I think that should be deployed more broadly. Obviously within the state of New York, you've got that down, but even in other states and perhaps north of the border as well. So that's great. Thanks for speaking about that.
Yeah, Bill Acker and I both come from backgrounds in the startup environment and clean energy technology. So we've lived that process of, from an idea to building a team to raising money to building first products, technology roadmaps. All of that has been part of our personal existence and background. So that part of it is very natural, and it's something that we bring to the table because of who we are and what we've done. But we've partnered with organizations, and you mentioned AMT, Alliance for Manufacturing Technology. They're the MEP, which is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership partner program for the southern tier of New York. There are 10 regions in New York State. AMT is the southern tier. They bring manufacturing expertise, and people who really, a guy who's part of my team, Ray Strauss, is a tremendous asset in terms of knowing how manufacturing works, how to source materials, how to make sure you've got the right people, parts, equipment together to make a product.
And it's good that you mentioned that. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention as well is, we've worked with people at AMT, and Ray, of course, I've met with Ray a number of times. He's toured our factory in Binghamton. Ray ran factories. Ray was a general manager or president of manufacturing companies. And so the fact that you've been able to attract people with real, valuable, actionable experience from the sectors that you're approaching, I've certainly never seen that model deployed before. And so, it was really, really impressive when we first started having those interactions to see that.
Right.
People that, they've gotten their hands dirty before. And I think that's a really important part of this.
Agreed.
Drawing that experience and that talent into the whole structure.
The New Energy New York is a great example of, it's a coalition, right? It's all these component organizations that bring their specific piece of a puzzle, but it's under an umbrella that is all focused at batteries and energy storage.
Yeah.
So I have routine meetings now, monthly cadence, weekly cadence for some, that are with folks who I wouldn't normally interact with at all. And they know more about batteries. I know much more about what they do. And things like workforce development. I mean, it's a huge issue for everybody in this space.
It is.
And finding workers, getting new people into the workforce, those community-based organizations who do that for a living every day, they get up and think, how can I get somebody from this neighborhood into a program? What support structure do they need in order to access this training program and be successful?
Of course.
Working with those people and tying it to the discipline-specific information that's relevant for manufacturing, for batteries, has been really rewarding, I have to say. It's like I have a whole network of people I know now and work with routinely that were invisible to me up to now. And not for bad reasons, but just we all
there was
put
no
our heads
reason
down.
to cross paths, right? Previously.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that focused funding brings people together, and then good program management, good administration, makes them kind of fire on all cylinders.
Oh, that's fantastic. One thing I did want to touch on as sort of part of the broader conversation was, the opportunities for research and development and the opportunities for new startups, the incubator program at a Binghamton University. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about those, right? Because, I've certainly met at your conferences a lot of organizations. They want to enter the market. They're new to the industry. They've got a lot of great ideas. They don't know how to turn it into something that they can actually, start deploying or turn into, a product fundamentally. Right. Can you speak a little bit about, the different tools that are available, within that structure, and then also the incubator program as well, because I think that's really exciting and interesting.
Yeah. I touched on a couple of pieces in my long preamble. Both the battery prototyping center and the testing center were initially conceived really as components or assets that we could put in place that would help that pathway from lab to market. And so if you're an inventor and you've got a thimble full of secret sauce and you think this is really going to change the world of batteries, it's pretty hard to convince the world that this thimbleful does anything.
Yeah, of course, of course.
If you can scale that to a point where you can actually make commercial quality cells and then have those cells tested in an accredited lab and having a lab report that says, here's how this material performed in a battery. Yeah. That's a huge, gigantic leap forward for that innovator. And so putting those assets in place, is a piece of that story of how do you get from a good idea into something that is producible, and can be done at volume and at a cost that actually has a relevance in the world.
Yeah, exactly. The market will approve of.
Right. So we've kind of had that focus. In particular, early stage company support related to batteries in the Kauffman Incubator, several other partner organizations have really brought a focus to the battery sector. And Kauffman, I think, has something on the order of 60 companies that are members of Kauffman, and some resident on campus, some virtual. But out of that total, over half are battery related. So you have this, thriving community in the startup world where people work long hours and come at any time of the day or night when they have an idea and needs testing. That they have both the place to do it and support infrastructure of all of these really great people at Kauffman who know how to make connections, know how to help them raise funding, know how to guide them on the path. It's been really interesting to be part of that.
That's really fantastic.
Some of the funding from New Energy New York supports that. So there's a charge up program that we're part of, that New York West is part of, that is a focused cohort-based kind of program. Applications are open now. So
there you go.
Yep, check that out. There's a webinar, I think, next week. But yeah, it is a very, again, it's a focused effort enabled by some of this additional funding. I'd be remiss, the R&D side, if I neglect to mention, so after winning this big award from the EDA, New Energy New York, Binghamton also competed for and won what's called the NSF Engines designation. So they are the NSF Upstate Energy Storage Engine, and that is it's one of a handful of designations nationwide. Mm-hmm. So we are NSF's chosen place to do battery work.
That's fantastic.
And it means additional funding. It means additional programs. There were just some awards announced. I saw this morning award came out for a company that's got a method to remove NMP from the process of making batteries, and very promising, very interesting. And they're going to get a total of $350,000 to help move their technology forward.
Right. And they'll be able to leverage some of those capabilities that you have within this ecosystem, presumably to do their testing and get those lab reports, and convince again the market that this fantastic idea is really worthy of further investigation.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's really exciting.
Yep. And there's even another piece of funding called the voucher program, where we put out a call for applicants to give their ideas about where they need to have some maybe testing done. Could be UL testing, could be performance testing, and then for the selected projects, that testing gets paid for by the New Energy New York program.
Oh wow! So, I mean, because we know that testing and product regulation and it's expensive, it's time consuming. It can be a real barrier to obviously get that product into the market, and a lot of organizations, they discover this. We've of course seen it. Is you get through the regulatory hurdle and you get this product into the field. The regulatory hurdle is just the first of many. Once a product is deployed and you start developing operational experience and generating client feedback, all of that then needs to get cycled back in. But having access to the type of resources through New York Best and NENY is obviously exceptionally valuable. One thing I wanted to ask you, so research development, you mentioned a number of times sort of the focus on, batteries, I guess, as a, sort of a catch-all term for a storage medium, right? We're going to store it in a battery. We've seen, in the news some challenges with some organizations and, certainly in Europe and, possibly also here in North America, and, trying to build, lithium batteries here. And they're running into some problems. So it's not to say that we won't continue driving in that direction. I think that's absolutely critical. But are there other technologies within that broader storage ecosystem? I'm thinking hydrogen, flow batteries, kinetic storage, whatever the case may be, that you guys are seeing come to you as well, looking for support and funding?
Yeah, absolutely. And NYSERDA recently, over the last 2 years, has issued what they call a program opportunity notice. It's an RFP for long duration storage, and those technologies tend to be non-lithium based, and they are pretty much the list you just described. Compressed air is in there, compressed water is another approach. So a kind of a gravity-based system that uses water underground.
So not like pumped hydro. We're talking, we're going to store a reservoir at a site out of line.
More like an oil well that would have water injected and pressurized below and then release when needed.
Okay, that's interesting.
Some really interesting work in that space.
That is really cool.
And a couple of companies that have gotten funding and will be doing, we hope, some pilot work very soon.
Absolutely.
It is. The phrase "all of the above" gets used, and for us, all of the above includes things like thermal storage. There's some really interesting stuff that's going on there, and sort of those even community
district heating and things like that.
It takes a coordinated effort to make all those things work.
Absolutely.
But when you can do it, I mean, the stakes are really high. That I think it dates from UC Berkeley, the energy flow chart, where all the sources of energy into the U.S. economy and then where they go in terms of transportation is a third and industry is a third. Well, there's a giant chunk that always flows off the top that is waste heat.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the ones that I hold out hope that we can find some of those solutions that capture some of that and put it back into useful
Absolutely.
places.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in some of those compressed air storage systems, they're recovering waste heat as part of the cycle, right? Yeah. Because a lot of the inefficiencies there are adiabatic heating that are impacting their efficiency. So that's good. I'm happy to hear that. Obviously the batteries are a big part of it, and they represent a large part of our portfolio in the space. But to hear that there is funding and interest and resources being dedicated to developing a more, again, sort of the way the supplier development program, the supplier ecosystem is working. a very holistic perspective. Looking at the entirety of the energy environment in New York, from generation through storage through distribution, taking the same type of holistic perspective on that, and view that as something that has a lot of different parts and can leverage a lot of different technologies to meet the different use cases. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I'd say I'd build on that point. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the work that New York Best does related to policy development in the state. So we are really heavily engaged in the New York ISO, in our Public Service Commission proceedings that are all related to generation, transmission, distribution, and the places for storage in all of those, and how they're connected, how they get compensated. All of those questions are key to really instigating a marketplace that ends up being self-sufficient, and where developers of projects prosper because they're getting paid for the actual value that their systems bring to the overall energy system. It hasn't been that way, and so we've done a lot of work and have policy working groups that sift through those thousands of pages of documents and write comments and write reply comments, and it's a slow and careful, methodical process that we are really deeply engaged in. And three of my colleagues spend essentially all of their time in the policy realm.
On the policy realm.
Yeah, because it really is critical. It's you can create a program that incentivizes building and installing a bunch of systems, and at the same time you need to create the background market that it makes those systems operational, profitable for their economic lifetime.
100%. That's cool. Yeah. Just one last thing. If we look at the state of New York, the size of the New York economy, the population of New York, it really is, in a lot of respects, sort of the economic engine of the Northeast. That's sort of our perspective on it. I think it's probably a perspective that's fairly common. How are you working with neighboring states from a policy directive perspective, from a supply chain development perspective? Is there a high level of integration? Is there not? Should there be? I just wanted to get your take on that as well.
Interesting question. We've had various initiatives along the way with surrounding states, Massachusetts in particular, I'd say. We have had, I think it's probably fair to say that there's opportunity to do more on that front. It is, I guess as New York Best, we feel like we've got our sights and our hands full with covering the state, which turns out is a really big place.
Well, it is. People think of New York, and they think of New York City. New York City is just one small little part down in the southeast corner. I mean, New York State is huge,
right?
And it's got diverse peoples, diverse industries, diverse geography. It's a big place.
And as much as I thought I knew about the kind of the manufacturing community and people who made stuff, I had absolutely no idea that there are something close to 5,000 manufacturers in the state of New York, all over the place. You go down these 2-lane highways and suddenly you go through a gate and there's a 30, 40, 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility. And it's encouraging is what it is. I feel like there was a legacy in the state of these really large companies, IBM, Xerox, Corning, Kodak, that had these networks of suppliers. As those big companies kind of wound down or exited manufacturing entirely, a lot of those supplier companies found ways to exist, to eke out an existence, and to then specialize and focus and really become really, really good at the things they do. Absolutely. So I keep getting surprised by people who walk up to me at events and say, "Hey, you're interested in manufacturing and batteries? Take a look." And literally this happened. It pulls out his phone and shows me a photo inside let's just say a gigafactory of equipment that he made just down the road in New York State. And none of us on the team knew of this company, knew anything about them. So it's encouraging, and it does feel like we're kind of, as much as we've made progress in 2 years, I feel like there's 20 years more of this work to do to keep identifying additional assets and plugging them in and making sure that others know about them, and then tying those connections together,
tying them all together, creating that network, that web of capabilities that's going to support the industry. Now, look, state of New York has such a long and rich heritage in manufacturing, right? Up down the Hudson Valley. I mean, some of the great, like you mentioned, those great organizations. I'm really happy to hear that, these efforts and these investments of time and energy are sort of reinvigorating, that core capability. It's really encouraging. Really encouraging.
And we're doing some good work on filling some of those empty spaces too.
Mm-hmm.
So there are in some cases some really good infrastructure still in place at those former big manufacturing sites, and so that's been part of the focus as well. Is how can we refit those sites and get new activity underway?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got a great transport network. You've got a great, distribution network. You've got all these former industrial sites that, were at one time very productive and certainly can be again. And, obviously we're starting to see that's what's happening. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Good. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
This has been great.
Really appreciate having John on the podcast today. Don't forget to subscribe and like. We're looking forward to attending some New York Best events that are coming up. I know you've got a number of them on the go.
Our Capture the Energy every May in Albany, and then we run a technology conference in the fall that for the last several years has been in Binghamton and probably will be again this year.
Yeah, unfortunately this year I couldn't attend, but my colleague went and I spoke at it last year. So looking forward to being there again.
Well, look forward to having you again.
John,
all right, thank you.
Thanks you so much.
Yes.
All right, thanks everybody. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.